A girl with ash on her gloves holds a flame in the wind. On the steps of the Western Union building, beneath a forest of telegraph wires that hum like fretful violins, Isabella II lifts a telegram strip to a match and watches counterfeit ink pucker into smoke. Around her, Park Row thrashes. Newsboys bawl extra into the dusk. Broadsheets slap like startled birds. The stock ticker in a window stutters as if it has forgotten its alphabet. The city has been soaked in kerosene rumor all afternoon. The match is not destruction. It is a refusal. The paper curls, the forged signature blisters, and the sovereign who came to read quietly becomes the only thing not moving in New York. New York, 1898. Park Row, newspaper row to those who breathe ink, is a canyon of headlines where reputations are flung from rooftop to sidewalk by noon, then replaced by fresher scandals by supper. The World Building pushes its copper dome against a pale sky, ambition plated in green. Across the street, the New York Journal building gleams with the bravado of new money and louder type. Between them runs City Hall Park, a lawn that knows the sound of oratory and the smell of rain on brick. To the east, the Brooklyn Bridge hoists its granite towers and spun steel cables like a lyre for giants. Every rumor plucked on Park Row vibrates across those strings to the boroughs and beyond. The Western Union headquarters keeps its marble cool, its wires warmer, and its pneumatic tubes, those iron intestines, are fed day and night. In this hive, Isabella II, 25, and widely underestimated by those who mistake youth for mercy, has a ritual. She reads everything. She reads not to be persuaded, but to hear the seams where persuasion fails. She reads in the public reading room off Park Row, where paper comes in new and leaves older than law. The day the city nearly split into rival states begins with a refusal scarcely larger than a breath. Isaiah Brooks, a compositor with steady hands and a reputation for saving even drunken copy with his eye, is told to set from strips, telegram slips, torn to rhythm, bearing state seals and midnight directives. The composing room smells of hot metal and inked lead. Linotype matrices chatter like teeth in a winter wind. Set it clean, an editor says without looking, thumb knifing through a stack of forged telegram strips. The words are bark. Coup declared. State at war. The punchline, if cruelty can have one, is that the sigils are so close to true that a tired eye would pass them, and tired eyes are what the composing room produces. Isaiah recognizes the false. It is not a matter of seals or signatures that can be aped. It is the cadence of command. He has set midnight orders before. Orders wear their urgency with grave precision, not with theater. He refuses. He says it softly, the way a man speaks to a fire he hopes to keep from spreading. No, he says it again. No. The foreman laughs, calls for a runner, waves Isaiah into a blind corner near the hellbox. Two editors, cuffed, watch chains bright as teeth, close in. The first blow is a shove meant to be an accident. The second is not. Who taught you to sniff the ink? One sneers. All false chumminess. We print and you place. That is the order of the Republic. They drag him toward the back stairs. The composing sticks clatter to the floor like silverware dropped at a wake. And then the laughable accusation arrives as if on cue from some dark libretto. In setting riot, she hears the commotion in the reading room because she listens for everything. Isabella rises, skirts whispering against the bench, and moves into the composing room with the quiet of a woman who has every right to be wherever she stands. The foreman looks up to make the speech he has for intrusive ladies, swallows it when her gaze cuts his sentence in half. She notes the strips, notes the cipher wheel, brass, thumb-worn, stupidly left on the galley, as if truth were an afternoon toy. Notes the slug with its shy miscut serif, that Isaiah prefers when he has to save a letter with personality. No editor outruns the truth, she says, voice low as unlit thunder. Secure the room, save every strip and slug. She doesn't shout. She does not need to. Two municipal guards in plain clothes, already watching the reading room for their own reasons, catch her eye and choose, in a beat, what side of the afternoon they will inhabit. They lock the doors. Isaiah, breathing like a runner at the tape, steadies himself on the stone pilaster and says, with the fierce calm of a man arguing with the entire century, they print my name as a riot, then sell the riot as news. Park Row spits him into the street anyway. The charge follows him, a stain on a coat you cannot turn inside out. Extra editions sprint across the city's corners faster than horses. Boys with paper crowns made of torn headlines scream Coup at men who answer with coins and fear. Broadsheets snag on carriage wheels and tumble underfoot, so many that the street gleams as if tiled with panic. The stock ticker in the World Building's glass arcade judders itself into a fit. Prices coughing into nonsense. Investment houses sending runners to the Western Union building to beg the wires for mercy. They cannot extend to anyone else. Freight yards, alarmed by rumors of blockades, hold cars that should move. Telegraph operators, paid to be neutral conduits, suddenly find themselves gatekeepers to conspiracy and saints to strangers. Some pull their plugs, some do not. The Brooklyn Bridge is a harp of confusion, cables singing with trolley sparks as wheels stutter on abandoned rails. City Hall Park becomes a quarrel in green. This is how paper makes fire without striking a match. While the city drinks confusion, Isabela arrives with a map rolled under her arm and a pencil behind her ear. She wears the calm of a woman who prefers apparatus to applause. She walks into the newsroom morgue, stacks of bound editions, dead ink that still hums when touched, and says, not to anyone, but to the room. Every lie leaves a seam. Follow the seam, find the hand. She spreads a map of pneumatic tubes, their depots, their couplings, every bend the length of a city block, every turn a potential slight. Western Union lines run like arteries under her fingertips. The tubes, like bronchi, perforate the lungs of Park Row. She lays the forged strips alongside real ones and looks not at the letters but at the spaces between. They are a filament-thin hesitation before a capital, a peculiar flourish on a Z that returns again and again at 13-letter intervals, as if a metronome had been placed under the lies. She circles the pattern, Z13. A human quirk becomes a signature becomes a trail. Isabela II sees 6 steps down the staircase of a rumor. She knows the city needs spectacle to feed its fear, and proof to quench it. She convenes a private council where she will not be overheard by hallways trained to gossip. A long table in a borrowed room, whose windows look onto the World Building's copper dome. The table is unusual. A chair for Mark Twain, who has been using words as lanterns for more years than anyone in the room, and finds a way to laugh only when laughter punctures pomposity. A chair for Clara Barton, whose gaze has counted lives saved and refuses to count them as numbers. A chair for Theodore Roosevelt, whose impatience is the shape of a cavalry charge but who carries in his pockets, today, more caution than usual. Rumor makes soldiers of fools. When a forged wire rules a nation, Twain says, tipping back in his chair as if the floor were a riverboat deck. The first repair is courage. Clara sets down a list, not of stock prices, but of neighborhoods where fear wrecks milk deliveries, and sends mothers to borrow from neighbors already hollowed by winter. Roosevelt leans forward, palms tenting as if over a campfire and a map. Prudence, he says, the word tasting like a bit in the mouth. We can move men, but we cannot unring a bell with bayonets. You will need force, but not the kind that bruises. Beyond the windows, the New York Journal building unfurls a headline that performs itself. Across the square, the World announces something similar, as if the two sides of a cracked mirror could compete for the attention of their own fragments. Isabela listens without interrupting the men who have made careers in the avalanche of words. Then she asks for the only thing she cares for: method. What is the shortest line? She asks Isabela I between the seam and a hand. Isabela I stands, places the forged strips alongside a printout from a stock ticker that should have nothing to do with the phrasing of a war order, and reveals the joke inside the crime. The ticker operator who keyed in the false panic forgot to cover his old habit. He drummed his fingers in 13s. Z13 prints not just in telegrams, but in everything his nerves touch. A path opens like a trapdoor. They hunt the tubes. What city calls pneumatic is in truth human runners with muscle memory, clerks with pockets, managers who prefer speed to integrity when the clock threatens their pride. The warehouse depot near the bridge smells of iron and oil. Its manholes breathe when the city sighs. Isabela I follows a shipment log that would bore anyone who has not learned to love tedium. And tedium opens into revelation. Forged strips entered the system, not at Western Union's main desk. Too many eyes, but at a branch behind a florist, where petals cover sin as well as they do graves. The clerk, faced with two women who are not afraid of paper, breaks without bravado. We were told it was a temporary test, he says, the phrase oiled like something practiced. A cable authentication test. The counterfeiters corrupted the ritual of integrity to pass the snake through the altar rail. And who told you? A man with a code name. He says it as if saying it invokes luck. George III. On Park Row, names are instruments. George III is not a king, but an arrangement of money and influence. A conductor's hand you cannot photograph. The line of the forgery runs back into the very buildings where the city's pride is printed by breakfast. A desk in a corner office, 2 floors below a publisher's portrait, where the wallpaper is more expensive than the truth. The point is not to drag a man into a light so bright the paper scorches. The point is to make the light correct the eyes. For that, the city must see proof, not performance. The Commission of Cable Integrity is born not in a pamphlet, but in a room that smells of reagent and lamp black. Experts unpack glassware in quiet. The city crowds the hallway outside. Reporters, aldermen, shopkeepers with the day's bread still under their nails. Women in shawls who do not read broadsheets, but read faces with terrifying accuracy. The commission's apparatus is simple and devastating. A chemical wash that coaxes out alterations in ink composition. A file of genuine cable paper that fibers differently under magnification than the counterfeit strips. And for dessert, the stock ticker logs that hum the Z13's nervous tattoo like a guilty lullaby. Isabela I Thurkan stands back. She is accused already of loving spectacle. Today she will love its opposite process. Strips hang from twine like laundry in a tenement, each labeled, each about to be undressed by science. The wash is poured. Where genuine ink runs gray, the forgery purples as if ashamed. A hush falls that is half relief and half insulted dignity. We were fooled. We could have seen, now we cannot unsee. Lines are drawn with the ease of a chalk mark on a courtroom floor. From forged telegram strips to pneumatic tube depots to a Western Union substation, where the operator's lunch tin contains a cipher wheel engraved with a worn initial, and from there to a cramped office whose filing drawers hold a ledger of payments that read like a who's who of Park Row's shadow orchestra. At the bottom of the ledger, next to amounts that could build a schoolhouse, a handprint of anonymity. George III. The commission does not try rumors. It tries strips and slugs and the human seam that stitches them. A telegraphist breaks down and admits the trick the conspirators taught him. Cut the genuine midnight emergency order in 2. Slip a counterman between halves. Then send in a burst that no one would question, because no one had ever questioned a midnight order. What newsroom wouldn't print a war if it arrived before dawn? A paper that loves speed more than sense is a soft target. The city stands inside the calm eye of public method and feels for the first time all week something like gravity return. Dissent, like smoke from a chimney, rises anyway. Voices in the world building, and the journal cry censorship and coronation. Editors who never met a principal they did not wish to rename call for street theater. Lawyers rehearse their forefathers' lines about liberty against monarchy. Isabela II refuses to make a speech that will taste like the last speech made by the last official to call himself necessary. She drafts what she needs instead, a midnight emergency order, not to seize pens but to steady wires. By this order it reads in a hand. The city knows from proclamations that repaired more than they broke. The telegraph companies of this city enter a temporary technical trusteeship of telegraphs under public supervision until integrity is restored. Communications flow, counterfeit does not. The phrase is a needle threaded with conditions, technical, temporary, supervised. It is not a hand on the mouth, it is a hand on the plug. At midnight, the Western Union building receives the order. No doors are broken, no presses stilled, but a new set of eyes appears in every room where wires converge. Engineers sworn to the commission, not to any publisher's vanity. They do not read content, they test origin. They do not halt transmission, they quarantine forged code. The city, nursing its outrage like a fashionable cough, waits for the blow that will let it gloat. It does not come. Trains that were idle surge forward on whispered confirmations that the rumors of blockades were rumors of rumors. In the composing rooms, the linotypes chatter themselves back toward legibility. Isaiah Brooks cleared says a late edition in letters less fat than the lie but more durable. He takes the paper without celebration. They print my name as a riot, then sell the riot as news, he repeats. And the repetition is not bitterness, it is policy. He will help print something else tomorrow, not here. In the hush that follows midnight, Isabela II walks with Isabela I across City Hall Park toward the bridge. Gas lamps halo faces. The cable song of the bridge is lower now, a bass note closer to sleep. I will not muzzle a free press, only unmask a forged one, she says, not for the record, but because truth tastes better spoken aloud. She knows the phrase will be quoted, misquoted, then stapled to her as if it were an advertisement. She accepts the pin. They stop at the center of the span where the wind peels back the scalp of the river and the city's reflection shivers like a rumor deciding whether to turn true. Between the towers, paper still skids on wind. Coup shrinks to a question mark, then to a white scrap. New York survives theatrical humiliation better than it does boredom. The trick is to keep it useful. Morning finds the world building and the journal building under a new light. Sunlight that has read the commission's report in the gray chill before dawn. On Park Row, men who swore at midnight that tyrants had arrived find their arguments embarrassing at breakfast. The newsroom morgue receives a new bound volume, the commission's findings, printed without flourishes, ink that chooses fidelity over flair. City Hall Park hosts a smaller table now, a literal one laid on sawhorses. On it, reagent bottles, a cipher wheel, a strip labeled Z13, a wire segment, with a nick where a counterfeit found its entrance. A teacher stands with her students and tells them, softly, that courage is also method. Clara Barton reads the names of train conductors who kept calm and got milk past a false barricade. The names take longer than anyone expects. Roosevelt lends wagons and men to unclogged depots, while chewing each task like jerky. A sneeze of a smile appears when he hears that no sabers were drawn. Twain writes a line on the back of a napkin and loses it on purpose. If it's good, someone else will say it better. The arrests are not parades. A clerk here, a broker there.
An editor whose courage is the color of brandy in a glass when no one watches. A Western Union substation manager who confuses cleverness with ethics. The ledger's author is not found. George III remains a signature without a face. The city hates unresolved endings almost as much as it hates dull heroes. In the absence of a villain to throw into the river, it turns its attention to the law. The Ato de Responsabilidade de Imprensa is not written in Portuguese, but its soul is. It protects criticism, even the cruel kind that makes officials itch. It criminalizes falsification, deliberate, proven, patterned, public harmful. It refuses to legislate taste but insists on origin and method. During debate, a publisher who prides himself on courage asks whether the law will be used to prosecute impatience. Impatience is a civic virtue, Isabela II says, voice dry enough to evaporate a puddle. Impatience with lies is a survival skill. The law passes with more yeses than any bill that winter, because fatigue is a party no faction can afford. Isaiah does not return to the composing room that outed him as a man to blame when others ran out of imagination. He is offered a place and declines with a politeness that should shame anyone capable of feeling it. He takes a small room off a side street in a neighborhood that reads because it wants to eat, not because it wishes to be fashionable. The press he sets up with help from a fund Clara and others assemble is not glamorous. It is correct. He prints union notices, birth announcements, the names of black veterans whose bravery is habitually misplaced by polite society, numbers for bread and for school. He prints minutes from the commission as a lesson in the grammar of sanity. Children watch through the window, inventing a chant not of extra, but of enough. When a broadsheet from Park Row Flutter lands at his door with a puff piece about the city's marvelous resistance to foreign plots, he does not read it. He strips it for kindling. At the World Building in the Journal, a different reckoning proceeds in rooms no one else can enter. An editor who refused to pay for lies loses a window. A man who profited from the riot without having the nerve to lead it gains a plaque. The city has a sense of humor that is, at root, exhaustion. Across Newspaper Row, a cartoon lampoons the commission's reagent bottles as witchcraft. Next to it, a column instructs readers how to spot Z13 in anything that hopes to talk them into buying fear. Sometimes satire arrives before truth. Sometimes after today they share a seat on the trolley. And then the turn. It arrives not with a confession, but with a letter. In the newsroom morgue, which now houses the commission volume between bound sets of the World and the Journal, Isabela finds an old envelope in a portfolio. Someone misfiled years ago, under municipal ordinances. It is a letter to a much younger Isabela II, full of advice about studying the machines that feed the city its self-image. The letter is brilliant, tender, unsentimental. It is also written with a slant so distinctive it wears its writer's private rhythm like a perfume. Every 13th word dips. Every Z carries a tiny flourish. Z13 lives here, not as a conspiracy, but as a nervous habit. The mentor who taught the young sovereign how to hear the city's wires has spent the winter teaching those wires how to lie. George III is not a stranger's face. George III is a hand she once trusted with her education. He made a code name of a crown because he wanted to be a nation without a ballot. Isabela II reads that letter on the steps of the Western Union building, the one we saw in flame. She holds the paper, and the city holds its breath. To publish the letter as proof would end an argument forever and begin another that would eat people for sport. It would unmask a conspirator and make him a martyr of the kind that lives in barroom ballads long after the facts grow old. So she burns it, not to protect him, he can drown without help, but to deny him the stage he bought with counterfeit ink. The commission has science, the city has memory. She will not feed it melodrama. Isabela watches the ash lift on a slight breeze. He counted on your mercy, she says. He counted on my love of theater. Isabela answers, a sovereign is a custodian of stagecraft. Today we leave the stage to the facts. She feels the cost anyway. On Park Row, the men who lost arguments will say the letter never existed. The men who won will say it said more. The smell of ash will cling to her gloves and to her name. She will pay the price in whispers, which is the currency of any woman who tells a city what it may not enjoy. That night the bridge sings itself to sleep. In a tenement, Isaiah sets his first leader as editor of his own small paper. The headline is dull, which is to say it is honest. A law passed, wires steadied, milk delivered. In City Hall Park, the grass remembers the shoes that stood upon it and forgives none of them. The World Building's dome looms like a moon. The Journal Building's windows shine like a chorus. The Western Union Building, scrubbed of counterfeit glamour, sits as if it has been there since Rome. A telegraphist runs a finger along a wire and feels, for the first time in days, the thrum of simple news. The baseball score, the theater billing, a weather report that only lies in the way all weather lies. Before we leave the wires, before the gaslight sputters, we return to the reading room. The bench still holds an imprint of a skirt. On the table, a clipping in a simple hand reminds any who sit method is mercy, courage too, and every lie leaves a seam. You can learn to feel it with your fingers if you slow your pulse and refuse to be flattered. If today's story has any power at all, it is not spectacle but instruction. Guard the origin. Inspect the interval. Demand the reagent where applause would do. If you've made it this far, hold the line with us. Follow the seam. Find the hand. Then choose, each time, not to be its instrument. If you want more stories where the age of wires meets the hunger of crowds and truth survives the night by inches and insistence, share this one with someone who believes headlines are weather. Then show them the barometer.